So this is part C of the Kudila TV channel, broadcasting online on the internet and from London by the Kudila campaign. And we are continuing to update on the demonstrations in solidarity with the campaign for justice for Sarah Everard in London, and for the demand that women must be safe in the streets everywhere. So the latest in the last hour has been held in the Parliament Square with several thousand people turning up there, including some members of Parliament. And the other item is that the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, London Metropolitan Police, Cressida Dick, has reportedly made statements saying that she's not going to resign. And the other thing is she has said is that if she thought yesterday's demonstration, the peaceful vigil were lawful, then she would have been there herself. This has been condemned by people who have said that there was no illegality seen by the security services, for example, including the fact that Kate Middleton was there herself without even wearing a mask. So, and the Mayor of London, in the name of London, Sadiq Khan, has issued, belatedly, he has issued a number of demands or requests that he has made to the police kind of inspectorate, the constabulary, to do a report into the violence in the demonstration on Saturday. And he and Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, are kind of, in a way, competing for the attention and the top gear of the demands that each of them is making after the police violence on Saturday. Now, this is the first time that I can remember any number of people have demonstrated in this way, condemning police violence, which is what the banners and the placards are saying in Westminster and elsewhere in London and in the country. And this rare event of any awareness about police responsibilities towards the public. On the one hand, the likelihood is that it will just be allowed to wither away, that is to say, the heat of the demand and the strength of the demand will disappear, swallowed up, consumed. My view is that it is quite possible. I'm only making a mathematical view, contextually. And my mathematical view is based on the calculation that if the headlines continue to be as strong as they have been today and online, that the police did many things that were illegal and wrong and oppressive, then, and as I say, mathematically, contextually, I can see a scenario being created by somebody who doesn't want any accountability to be delivered by the police, that a diversionary event, a dramatic event, a stunt may be staged in order to divert attention from this particular one. And I say this because I have observed for a very long time the behavior of the police and the behavior of the kind of parliamentary members and agencies that should have been holding the police service under requirements of accountability, and they haven't. And so, therefore, the condemnation of the police by various members of parliament today may wither away, may go away, may get consumed by other things. And as I said, one of the other things may be an intentional diversion that may be staged in a dramatic fashion to draw public attention away from the police violence against the women that dominating the running orders in the newsrooms today. So that's the up to this time, which is not long after 8 o'clock, that is 26 hours GMT on Sunday, the 14th of March 2021. We shall come back to this, obviously. And I can read a tweet that we have posted to Femi Sori about his reliance and dependence and faith in the integrity of Parliament and integrity and the good faith of MPs about changing the system. So we are saying to Femi Sori, we said that about 40 minutes ago, you are operating on the assumption that MPs and Parliament are embodiments of honesty, integrity, and genuine enlightenment. That is not the assumption that we make, but we are saying that Femi Sori, one of the activists that came into prominence as an opponent of the Brexit propaganda and lies, it appears that he is not he doesn't say, and not evident in these tweets today, which party he belongs to or which political party he supports. However, he is putting too much faith in the proportional representation system of voting. And I don't think that the proportional representation itself will deliver the kind of improvement and the change, fundamental change that the British system requires. And that's why we put that one there to him. Obviously, Femi Sori is not going to return and reply or respond because he knows that he cannot respond. And we said about 4 hours ago, we had said about Sadiq Khan that he had been freed by his abductors. What we were suggesting there was that Sadiq Khan had been silent for the time up to then, shortly before then, and he was making statements about having written kind of demanded answers to questions as to what the police did wrong, because he said that he wasn't satisfied with the answer or explanation that the police gave him before he extended his query and asked the chief inspector of the constabulary to provide an urgent investigation and report to him. And all of this kind of issuing statements, asking for reports, setting up inquiries, all of that is done as part of the routine in Britain. Whenever something serious goes wrong, that is what happens. And the fact that the police have done this to women peacefully protesting, and they've attacked women, grabbed hold of women, violates so many things, including the fact that male police or even female police are not supposed to physically manhandle or woman-handle peaceful protesters. Historically, the Hillsborough disaster shows that the police won't be held to account for this violence yesterday. And the process of their not being held to account would be like asking, like Sadiq Khan and Priti Patel have already asked, for reports and full reports, etc., etc. And the reports will find all kinds of excuses to justify the police conduct, and this will be forgotten. And I mean, all the inquiries that happen in Britain, anyone who is not in Britain and who is not a student of British actual institutions and where the governance is corrupt and the corruption is kind of justified, needs to know this world exclusive diagnostic statement from us. These inquiries are part of the British corruption, institutionalized corruption. And this will be covered up by corruption, disguised as inquiries, investigations, and all the rest of it. As I was saying in the previous edition, either part A or part B, I think it was part A, that I spoke about Scarman inquiry. And the Scarman inquiry was with High Court Judge, House of Lords as it was called, the Judicial Committee of the House of Lords as it was called, which is now the Supreme Court. And Leslie Scarman was a member of what would be the Supreme Court if you were active at the time. That is now. Now, Leslie Scarman was in the 1980s, let's say. His report, so-called inquiry into the Brixton disturbances, so-called, were treated in the mainstream media and Fleet Street as if that was a piece, that was an addition, there was a kind of amendment to the Bible. That is in the context of the Anglican kind of centric church and culture based on that. But Scarman was not delivering anything revolutionary. Yet he was elevated to the point, to the level of his kind of like a moral revolutionary. And the Scarman report was mentioned too many times in the kind of wake of his publishing the report. And that was repeated a decade or so later about the Macpherson report into the police conduct over the racists murdering the teenager Stephen Lawrence. And it has been forgotten. So much so that nobody mentions the police, or nobody mentions either Scarman or Macpherson in relation to what the police did yesterday. That is how stupid the mainstream is, or that is how deeply ignorant the mainstream is, or that is how deeply in denial and in negligence and in prejudice denial those who write and edit and publish this stuff in the mainstream, the Fleet Street and online versions of them. Now, I have to say a number of things here. I mean, while Scarman was the kind of author of the report into the police conduct of the Brixton troubles or riots, I was the keynote speaker among 4 keynote speakers, but I was the keynote speaker at a UK-wide conference organized against racism and against the racist media. And that was a weekend-long kind of conference that took place in a hotel in Birmingham in the Midlands. And I had taken the lead role in organizing that conference. I had put the maximum pressure on the conspiracy for racist enslavement, or CRE, in other words, the Commission for Racial Equality. Although I called it all of those things, constitutionally, legally, I had the right to demand that they did something to address the racist media and address the racist behavior of all the agencies, including the police. And the Commission for Racist Enslavement was completely lost for direction. It never had any direction. So it was left to me to put them under pressure. And I put them under pressure successfully. And I told them that I would campaign against them. And I would campaign against the CRE, and I would campaign for its abolition if the creeps there didn't hold the conference and fund it from the public fund that they were getting millions of pounds, which they were wasting and not producing anything. So as a result of my particular demands that I put at several meetings held at the CRE HQ based at Victoria, near Victoria Station in London, this conference was held in 1981. And I was the main speaker, but I was one of the four. But as it turned out, the substance was contained in my speech. I'm not going to recall verbatim what I said, of course not. But essentially, what I said in my keynote speech was what I had said as the reason for demanding the holding of this conference. And these people who came were mainly members of the various kind of race relations bodies and similarly active persons, but all of them, except me, all of them were in paid employment in one form or another. And what I said about the racist role and character of the BBC at that conference in 1981 has been vindicated, and it's something that only I had organized and nobody else had organized anything like that. Of course, there was another conference in 1985, I think, held at the University of Manchester, where I was the only keynote speaker. Now, that one was not organized by me, but I was the keynote speaker. It was a UK-wide event, and it was attended by similar type of people from African backgrounds, Caribbean backgrounds, Asian subcontinental background, that is Pakistani, Bangladeshi, and Indian. But the number of Chinese people or people from the Southeast or Far Eastern Asian kind of backgrounds was significantly less. If a similar event were organized today, the numbers of those people from those parts of the Asian subcontinent would be significantly larger because of the arrival in this country and settlement of people from the Far East since 1980s. Since the 1980s has been significant or have been significant. And also the imminent new arrivals from Hong Kong will make a demographic kind of transformation that would be very, very unprecedented. Now, going back to the keynote speeches on the seminar, the two kind of UK-wide seminars that I had organized or I had addressed as the keynote speaker. These are now worth reviewing because of what I said in the 1980s about those, because it's all about racism, about police, about media. And all these factors are very much, again, in the news because they're the mainstream kind of forces. And what I said about the media and what I said about particularly the role of the BBC in perpetuating racism and racist denial, all of those things are my work, my observation, not somebody else's, because none of the academics nor other professionals, so-called, employed in any of the fields has said anything that I have said and I have been saying. And the clear point is that everything I had said was being kind of, after I said it or during the deliberation, for example, the University of Manchester event, they were appreciating what I was saying, but being in posts, employed posts, all these individuals either employed at various race relations councils or parts of race relations activities in various organizations, which have now effectively been replaced or scrapped as a result of the disappearance of the CRE and its replacement by the corrupt and racist and more sinister Equality Commission, which happened by the servitude of Trevor Terrible Phillips. Now, Trevor Terrible Phillips is a full-time paid slave, mental slave, for the cause, for the agenda of racists. So therefore, in the last kind of few weeks or days, Trevor Terrible Phillips has been given a spot here and a spot there, repeating his servitude and mental slavery, supporting the status quo and opposing or undermining the anti-racist commentary or anti-racist narrative or anti-racist demands. So what I'm saying is that all these issues of yesterday and today about the police, policing, and the media, and the role of the media in attacking Meghan Markle, and the role of the Supreme Court as the latest judicial kind of bureaucracy in attacking the rights of Shamima Begum, these are not in terms of policy, in terms of the law, in terms of the structure, and in terms of the narrative and the agenda. These are not, for me, new things at all, because I've been dealing with those for decades. And as I said, I organized this nationwide, UK-wide event at the hotel concerned in Birmingham in 1981. And then a few years later, others took the initiative for whatever reason, and they organized a similar event at the University of Manchester. But I turned out to be the main speaker for that one. And the fact that I delivered a very effective speech was evident in the fact that I received the highest spontaneous applause. And also, Alfred Tang Chow. Alfred Tang Chow was a Jamaican person of Chinese origin, or a person of Caribbean island, somewhere in Ireland, either Jamaica or some other island in the Caribbean. But he was a Chinese person. So Alfred Tang Chow edited the then West Indian World. Now, the history of the West Indian World, the weekly, is interesting in many ways. But for this discussion, I'll just refer to the West Indian Weekly as the main weekly paper politically in circulation about the Black community. Now, that shows that the Asian part of the Black community, let's say, didn't have a similar publication like to the West Indian world. There were some titles, but they didn't match the kind of profile or the name recognition of the West Indian world, because the West Indian world had been published way before any other kind of title. But that, for the time being, is the brief reference. I have got other things to say about the West Indian world, but not in this part. So Alfred Tangsha was editing the West Indian world from a actual spot in actual Brixton itself. And he said to me that because I was writing a weekly column in that publication, Muhammad Haq Says, and he said to me that that was his biggest selling point, my writing that column. Now, I wrote that for free. What he contributed to me, he didn't even cover the cost of my research of daily newspapers. Because, for example, today, I have visited and collected the papers from a different outlet. And the bill that I'll have to pay tomorrow, because I didn't have access to banking facilities today. So I have to raise the money and pay him £70 tomorrow for what I collected today, of course, including the Morning Star. So what I need to buy and pay for in order to make even a single comment about the news one day outstrips and exceeds the amount of money that people get paid, if you like. So I wasn't paid by Alfred Tangsha for my writing or for my research. And it applies to all the other publications. But despite that fact, and I said that in context, as part of the campaign and its specific, unique identity in terms of the involvement in income and money and all the rest of it, Alfred Tangsha says that my column was his biggest selling point. Now, to me, it was not a surprise because I had been always writing stuff in newspapers that delivered unique perspective and unique attraction in terms of readers and the quality and the standard. And that applies to more than one language. Now, why am I saying all of this? Because it shows that I have been observing events, similar events, that have been taking place in the last few weeks. Now, the criticism I make of the BBC and criticism I made of the BBC in the 1960s, when I first became to kind of monitor or listen to the BBC radio for the first time in the 1960s, is that the BBC has not changed its kind of attitude, if you like, collectively, even after the so-called British Empire ended. And the input, the contents, the kind of materials that the BBC was broadcasting to the world on the radio, because in the 1960s I wasn't here. So the materials were artificial, false, fake, fabricated, and they were dressed up as the completely wrongly assumed superior kind of minds of the empire. Now, there is no evidence, there never has been any evidence that imperialists have superior minds. What the imperialists have in relation to the people they foist the empire on is the facilities of collective connivance and lying that they apply against the victims or subjects of their colonialism, imperialism, who are, for various reasons, disorganized, in disarray, and don't have confidence among themselves in one another, and they don't have the confidence in their own kind of abilities to get rid of the imperialist kind of occupation and so on. So the BBC, I never was a fan of the BBC, in other words. And when I got to London and came across the television version of the BBC, it became very clear. In fact, it became, without any doubt, any shadow of a doubt, most clear that the BBC was not fit for purpose, that it was lying to the people in Britain itself. Not only had it been lying by radio to the people in the rest of the world, but it was lying to the people, domestic people like the Gullibles and the others in Britain itself. It follows, therefore, that the BBC could not be trusted to report in a way that tell the truth about racism, let alone tell the truth about how to get rid of racism, and so on. So the BBC has been persistently an integral part and a powerful part because of the strength of the medium. Broadcast medium is stronger than the alternative. That is to say, the print media is less effective in getting directly to the people targeted. So all the evidence was there, and I have been right from the beginning. I have been an assiduous collector of evidence. And when I say evidence, it's not prejudiced or prejudicial, artificial, fabricated, unreliable evidence. My evidence has been fact-checked and verified over and over again by using multiple sources and multiplicity of sources. So that is what I found was actually strengthening the actual monitoring and diagnosis of Fleet Street while I was in the UK. So my resolve and my kind of references against the BBC, my arguments against the BBC were stronger with those additional access to the evidence. For example, one piece in The Guardian disclosed for the first time, and it was not possible to find that kind of report at that time if I were abroad. So The Guardian disclosed that for a very long time, right from the beginning, the British government Foreign Office had been the courier of many materials that were broadcast on the BBC World Service. And The Guardian suggested that these stories were actually the items that the BBC broadcast on the World Service. Items had been only available to the British state as the Foreign Office. And the Foreign Office was, in effect, being echoed by the BBC World Service. The conclusion was the same. I had made the conclusion before without reading this, without thinking that I would ever read that confession in The Guardian or any other paper. But this was done at least 20 years after I first concluded that the BBC was actually broadcasting strategically obtained information that could only be available to the British government or a state. So when I spoke at the conference in Birmingham in 1981, I also followed up my keynote speech in the first session of the conference by giving a session, kind of addressing one session supposedly for training for people to implement what I had said or what had been said including by me at the opening session. And in that training session, let's say, or workshop session, I had two other people sitting next to me or near me. One was a man from Senegal, and another was from South Africa. I think the South African one, I think he's passed now. His name was Robert Govinda, who had been an established journalist in South Africa during the apartheid years. And he came to the UK before the end of the apartheid years and before the release of Nelson Mandela. And Robert Govinda kind of took too many temporary jobs as a sub-editor or as a kind of de facto editor for little publications like the ones that Rifraf Ali was funded by Ken Lyingstone Livingston to publish, Caribbean Times and Asian Times and so on. But Robert Govinda was also a kind of agent for motor car salespeople or companies that sold motor cars. So he doubled as a kind of writer on cars, new cars, etc. And I think that gave him better income than the others. So Robert Govinda was a mixture in terms of his occupation, in terms of his behavior. But whenever he spoke to me, he openly said that he was a fan of mine. He was significantly older than me, but he said that he was a fan of mine, which I found remarkable. Not because I hadn't had any other person saying that thing. I had always quite a few people saying they were my fans or whatever. But this one astonished me because he said on the one hand that he was a fan of mine. But then when he went away and wrote the stuff, there was no sign of anything to do with what he was saying about my position in terms of the analysis, in terms of the diagnosis which I am doing, in terms of the morality and the duties that the kind of journalists who said they were against racism owed to the readers. But Robert Govinda had the capacity to write truthful things, but he didn't in the main. And when he wrote the series of books, so-called, for the still in power Romanian kind of Ceausescu, so you can see the date, the time when I'm talking about, in the 1980s. Ceausescu's praise. This is world exclusive diagnostic and factual investigative disclosures from this program. Now, Robert Govinda had written or authored, I think, at least 3 separate titles that praised or were dedicated to praising Romania's Ceausescu. And one day, I didn't have a car. Robert Govinda was giving me a lift from one location in Tower Hamlets to another location, let's say. And he was driving and he said to me, as we approached the Blackwall Tunnel, that he was a fan of mine and he greatly admired my work and my interventions, which he had witnessed at many events against the Commission for Racist Enslavement and all the rest of it. And he said that he would be honored to give me as gifts 1 copy each of his books that he had written about Ceausescu. And he stopped his car and he signed each of the books that he gave me. And I'm not going to discuss the contents of those books at this stage, but except to say that I mean, those books were completely embarrassing because they were full of praise for Ceausescu. And the fact that he had managed to make any deal with anyone with those so-called books showed that Govinder was very much able to act as a parasite and to get money by writing these parasitical books. Because no objective, investigative researcher or journalist would write that kind of stuff full of so much flattery about somebody like Ceausescu. So when Robert Govinder kind of said all of those things about how wonderful Ceausescu was, I read that at the time, and I obviously didn't have to read those things in order to know how embarrassing the contents were. Because one of the people that Robert Govinder actually ended up kind of, quote, working for in that temporary way as a kind of freelance editor was a crook from Bangladesh. The crook from Bangladesh, I call him a crook because in the 1970s, during 1970, he launched a number of newspapers. He was a motor car salesman, but he decided for some reason to launch a number of newspapers in Dhaka. And as the kind of availability of really independent thinking newspaper proprietors was very, very small, very low, I tried. He put an advertisement or a series of advertisements. So I went for an interview with him on the theoretical assumption that if I got the kind of post, I'd be able to write in a daily newspaper, which I didn't have access to at that time. I had access to other periodicals, and daily newspapers I had less daily access than I needed. I needed to say things, which is what I want to say about things going on. But the fact that most of the things I have to say are against the liars going and the lies going on. So I needed that platform, not for any career, but to tell the truth about the people in case somebody came across what I wrote and read this and was guided to find the truth or seek the truth, etc. So this criminal turned out to be launching a weekly thing from Fleet Street. He hired a place in Fleet Street, which is very expensive even in those days, and he employed Robert Govinder. Now Govinder had no idea whatsoever as to my knowledge of this crook from Bangladesh. So Govinder completely wasted my time by telling me about this owner. And obviously he understood later that I knew this criminal. And Govinder actually wrote absolute banalities and stupidities just to get the money from this idiot. And he did. And then Govinder also got involved with some other outlets. Again, he wrote banalities and stupidities. So what I'm saying here is that there have been African and Asian kind of people, or say people of African and Asian backgrounds, who have been writers and who have been kind of journalists, who have been employed professionals and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, all of them, and I'm including this reference to Govinder for that reason, all of them have given up or given in have become complicit and have colluded. And I said that on the record. And that includes the elder brother of Trevor Terrible Phillips, Mike Phillips, whom I don't call any names, but that is where Mike Phillips ended up. And this applies to these people calling themselves licensed law trading barristers. I mean, there is not one single licensed law trader barrister, QC or whatever, who is doing the right thing. That is to say, they're all behaving like parasites. And I include the Pakistani Sibghatullah Qadri, who has got a QC with his name. These are all people I have known as members of one campaign or another over the years. And every single one I have found to have kind of not kept the word or the commitment. Of course, I have known Sibghat Qadri less than I have known Rudy Narayan. And Rudy Narayan was so lax with his integrity that we would make an agreement at a campaign meeting, let's say, 5 o'clock. And by the time we went to our places and left the meeting, 2-3 hours later, we would hear either on the radio or read somewhere else or hear through other kind of channels that Rudy Narayan had broken his word and has made a statement claiming all kinds of credit for the campaign, which our campaign agreement was absolutely opposed to, and we agreed not to allow any of the members to make anything like that kind of claim that Rudy Narayan was making. And I could give names like Alex Pascal. Now, Alex Pascal was the longest in place presenter of the Radio London Black Londoners. And I here remind Alex Pascal, if he's watching this one, that the 1981 conference held in Birmingham, I gave the keynote speech and Alex Pascal recorded it. And I've asked Alex Pascal to give me a copy of that recording. And Alex Pascal somehow has managed now, this is now 40 years, isn't it? 81, 91, 2001, 2011, 2020, is 40 years ago. And Alex Pascal should let me have a copy of that. Then I can see what exactly I said. Of course, I don't need that to say the substance of what I said. The substance has not changed in the 40 years. I met Alex Pascal by accident at the counter of the Shoreditch, Clerkenwell and Shoreditch County Court during 2011. And he promised to communicate to me and even to come to Tower Hamlets. And I invited him to a meal, and he didn't. I have written several emails, and Pascal has stayed silent. Now, this is a fact I'm about to say. That guy from the Senegal and Alex Pascal were among the 5 or 6 people who were in the hotel room in Birmingham, including Robert Govinda, where I was preparing the next day's kind of workshop or training shop. And in preparing the speeches, I was dictating the main theme and the speech and the narrative. And Pascal and that guy from Senegal were supposed to be writing what I was saying. So when I was dictating, my dictation was apparently so kind of burdensome, like They were finding the dictation too much, too intensive. And both Pascal and the guy from Senegal, this is a fact. At middle of the night or 2 o'clock in the morning, they threatened to jump out of the window, of the hotel window. Now, these are the details that you will not read in the Fleet Street, of course. But these are the details of the work and the campaign against the corrupt and racist media that I have been actively involved in. And that is the extent of my involvement. That kind of involvement is unique. And they threatened to jump out of the window because of frustration and tension and depression. Because I was telling them, the narrative I was giving them was completely at odds with their preference. And their preference was to carry on conniving, colluding, and be capitulating to the racists and the others that gave them the spot. And my idea was to debunk the lies and expose the lies and tell the truth and put forward the alternative and the solution to the lies and the lying and the capitulation and so on. So I don't believe that today's disquiet expressed in Fleet Street about yesterday's attacks on the women by the London Metropolitan Police will be stopped, or that the police commissioner, she has said already, Cressida Dick, that she won't resign. Now that is something that is less certain than the certainty that the police will get away. She may resign, which will be a very small price bureaucratically that the Metropolitan Police will be required to pay. And in any case, even if she resigns, she will have a bigger pension fund at her disposal than most people who have been attacked will ever have. And so what I'm saying is that the institutions of government, so-called, in Britain are so lax, so unreliable, so lacking in rigor, that no matter how badly the police have behaved on Saturday, or how badly the ministers behave, or how badly or dishonestly Boris Johnson behaves, they are not going to be held to account. And it's not because they're Tories. When Tony Blair lied to the whole country and committed the UK to a genocidist attack against the people of Iraq, I mean, everyone knew, most people knew that he was lying. At the time, we knew that, I knew that he was lying, absolutely through his teeth. And after the millions of innocent people have been murdered now, nobody has held Tony Blair to account, nor Jack Straw to account. Jack Straw was the foreign secretary during the Belhaj kind of torture of the Libyan person by the Americans with the collusion of the British Secret Service, or with the complicity of the Secret Service, or with the knowledge of the Secret Service. Whatever the extent of the participation was, this was against the law, it was against the Magna Carta and all the rest of it. But nobody has been held to account. Nobody has been found guilty in a court. So it is most unlikely that any of the police persons committing the crimes against the protesters, peaceful protesters, will be found to have done anything wrong. So they won't be charged, that they won't be tried, and they won't be prosecuted. That is my prediction at this time. If something happens that actually proves my prediction inaccurate, then I'll, of course, review the contents and accordingly update my commentary. But the pattern for decades has been, as per what I said, as what I said, because the Hillsborough disaster, let's say, shows that nobody, no policeman or whatever, can be found to have done anything wrong. There have been other cases, of course, dozens of cases where police have been accused by black people of doing of misconduct, accused them of misconduct, but nobody has been found to have done anything wrong racistly. So that's the actual extent of the evidence. And the evidence does not show that Cressida Dick or any of the policemen responsible for attacking the women yesterday would be held to account. And this will go on. I mean, this will be the way that people are treated in this country. And there is no civil liberties for people like these women that have been manhandled, brutally treated and held down. And I don't know the extent of the physical contact by these police with the women. But I would suggest that whatever it was, the police will be in denial of what they have done and what their rights are. And this all goes back to the serious problem that exists about policing, serious problem about the accountability and the standard of policing. Because there has been no accountability requirement on the police in established law or in legislation in this country. As I said earlier today, there exist only 3 pieces of legislation about the Metropolitan Police, and there 2 were done 140 or 180 years ago, and the one that has been done in the last, say, 20 years is not worth mentioning, because it actually doesn't change the status quo. And the assumption that the police kind of owe no duty to the citizens or to Parliament, but to the Queen, is indeed very, very remarkable. And the Queen has been now, we are moving on to Charlie Hebdo and the behavior of the racist royal family towards and against Meghan Markle and Harry. Harry because he has married Meghan Markle, and Meghan because she is a black woman. The kind of almost unanimous condemnation that has already been published by all the Fleet Street writers against the Charlie Hebdo cartoon on Brenda, and is showing Meghan Markle as a black victim of the white power, which is a kind of lineal reflection, representation, and updating of what happened in Minneapolis, where George Floyd was murdered. I mean, that depiction by a French, satirical magazine of what happened in America extends the reach of attention, if you like, against the racist behavior of the English royal family, that extends it from America to France and makes it international, even before the kind of Charlie Hebdo depiction, the news was already very much avidly followed in the various continents, all the continents. And this kind of expansion and extension of the allegation and the narrative on Brenda as a racist monarch is not something that Fleet Street can have the capacity to deal with, let alone defeat. This, as I said before correctly, is the shape of things to come about the monarchy. And Brenda has shown over this last fortnight that she has been overly praised for being wise and all the rest of it over the decades that she has been in the reign. This is the biggest crisis in terms of reputation, because Brenda has now been exposed as being the royal family head, the head of the royal family, which is racist, which has harassed and hounded this black woman who had the audacity to marry Harry, a member of the royal family. And this reputational damage is very much unlike whatever the Metropolitan Police will be able to kind of absorb and overcome. The royal family is now bad news because of the racism and because of the fact that the French magazine, which for all kinds of reasons, after the attack by the so-called Muslim terrorists, Charlie Hebdo occupies a very good profile among people who don't like Muslims and whatever. Not that the Muslims community was in any way responsible for or sympathetic with the attack on the journalists at Charlie Hebdo. But because of the profile in the Western kind of media, Western Europe and so on, this one will damage the royal family's reputation in the way that none of the Fleet Street papers seems able to foresee or understand. Because they are saying, on the one hand, they are saying that Meghan and Harry will lose kind of media focus or media platform, and they will disappear and they will vanish and whatever. That is what they're saying. But also saying that they think that Meghan is preparing to become the first woman president of the USA. Now, those two kind of depictions or characterizations of Meghan's abilities and her honesty don't match. So what they're doing this for is to create any kind of pathetic kind of ground to mock and ridicule Meghan. It's Meghan who is the target and undermine her. But also they are showing evidence that they believe that Meghan is a person that can do things. Like they're even saying that she will be, or she is preparing to become the first woman president of the USA. And they're also kind of grudgingly accepting that they've got enough money to run the kind of campaign to make Meghan the president or presidential candidate. So they are caught. They are caught. The royal family and their servile Fleet Street are caught with an impossible challenge, because it's not coming from the Muslim country, let's say. I mean, Meghan is not a Muslim, and everything that she's doing as an American. And despite the fact, at the end of the day, America is the kind of place to go to for the British, no matter what the particular political color is of the British incumbent in the post of British Prime Minister. So the British look up to the Americans. And when you look from America to the British, Meghan Markle is in a much powerful position than the Fleet Street are prepared to concede to her, or even Brenda is prepared to concede to her, because she has connections and she's an American. She's now back home and she's home. And that is something that they shouldn't have caused, because they hounded her out of Britain They harassed her out of the royal family, and they demeaned her, and they lied about her, and they exposed her to bullying and racism and lies. And now, one after the other, I mean, they are being targeted for attack, which is what the Charlie Hebdo cartoon is doing. And I think the statement that was issued by Will saying that the royal family is not a racist family. He's not a child, and Wills knows that any allegation of the royal family being racist, any allegation that sticks, will be fatal for him. So he exhibited himself and his wife walking while followed by an African woman, African looking woman, let's say, whether she's Jamaican origin or African origin or Jamaican kind of background, African origin, of course, doesn't matter. In the picture, it looks like a woman of African origin. I mean, isn't it ridiculous? I mean, that's not how they go about. They don't have a black person with them. That is the norm. And this time, days after his speech that they are not racist, they have a proof. This black person. Ridiculous. And it shows the extent to which this racist royal family has got caught. And I think this one is going to be more horrible than Brenda has ever withstood in terms of the image. And no amount of Fleet Street lying and no amount of racism and kind of grudgingly accepting Meghan as a competent person is going to diminish the onslaught that they have asked for, if you like, worldwide. Because in America, although only 17 million people are said to have watched, 17 million people is, for a television interview, is quite a lot, because there have been so many other outlets that come into fore or come into being after the internet emerged, that 17 million is not to be dismissed for one show, one sitting. Okay? That's a lot of people, and 11 or 12 million people in the UK, also significant. And then they've got the idea, they've got a detailed piece of complete and utter nonsense discussing how Piers Morgan kind of was pushed out of the ITV. Now they're blaming the mainly, almost all of them white or white majority employees in that program that have been kind of pushing the executives at the ITV to get rid of Piers Morgan for his racism. So they've given a whole page to this, how Piers was cancelled by the young wokies. By wokies, the main anti-racists. That's what the Mail on Sunday is saying. The point is that they're riled, they are completely rattled. They say that they don't care about Meghan and Harry, and that Meghan and Harry will disappear from the public kind of platforms. But at the same time, they say that Meghan is preparing not for another job, not for an acting contract or anything, but to become the president, no less. President, the first female president of the USA. I mean, that is how worried they are about what Meghan will do. And by saying that, they're trying to unsettle her prospects. So, we are back to talking about Shamima Begum. And the only thing that I can add here is that it has been noticed by our campaign that she has an account on Twitter, but we shall not follow it, nor shall we make any contact about it, because we don't know who is behind that account. and we don't want to go into the details of it. And the other thing is that today the Daily Telegraph website published a picture of her, calling it the Western. She's getting a makeover, getting dressed as in Western clothes and whatever. This is the second time, because the Rohit Kachru report on the 26th of February, on the day the Supreme Court ruled against her, also showed Shamima Begum in Western clothes, in wearing a hat and trousers and not a hijab or whatever. We just note that. But we are not concerned about what she's wearing now or whatever. We are concerned about the rights that she and her friends were denied when they were children. And we shall be sticking to that as the main focus of our demands. Now, back to Roxana Fias. Now, this is the 14th of March 2021. That is 3 calendar years since I appeared live on a satellite channel, which is defunct now. And I appeared to do a favor to somebody who was in need of help, because they said that they didn't know how to handle him. So I appeared there not to kind of do some artificial thing, but I'm saying that the motivation was to help somebody deal with Robin Wales as a combative person on the program. And I hope that everyone who has seen the program that was broadcast on the 14th of March 2018, that they will agree that I did the necessary to hold him to account and to expose some of his lies. Why am I talking about Robin Wales when I'm supposed to be talking about Roxana Fias? Because Robin Wales, over the 16 years that he was incumbent as the mayor of Newham, or the mayor occupant or incumbent mayor at the expense of the people of Newham, that record was abused by Roxana Fias, because she exploited that and she took advantage of that, and she kind of got herself nominated as the Labour Party's candidate for mayor at the May 2018 mayoral election. And according to the person who presented that program on the 14th of March, according to the person who presented the program on the 14th of March 2018, the people who watched that program from Newham, or the Labour Party members or persons who watched that program, thanked that person who presented the program, and several of them sent clear message through him to me to give me special thanks for everything I said and did on that program against Robin Wales. It therefore follows that at the election that took place after that program went out, my contribution against Robin Wales played a part in increasing the numbers of people who voted for Roxana Fias as the alternative to Robin Wales, in order to stop Robin Wales getting the nomination again. So that way, according to that evidence, because I didn't talk to those people, but this person who presented the program told me of their own initiative that was what had happened. I didn't solicit that information, and I wouldn't have known about who spoke to him or not, because I didn't go to the event where the Labour Party declared the result of the elections of the party members the votes of the party members on who should become the Labour Party's candidate for mayor. So, having learned all of that from this person who presented the program, I conclude that I contributed significantly to the increased votes that Roxana Fiaz got. I don't say every vote that Roxana Fiaz got was down to me. No. I said they increased whatever the numbers of people that voted for Roxana Fiaz and against Robin Wales after watching my appearance against Robin Wales on the television 14th of March 2018. So on that basis, Roxana Fiaz obviously owes and owed me an extra series of thanks and gratitude. So has she done that? Has she delivered that series? Emphatically not. And for that reason, in the next edition, I shall be giving chapter and verse of the wrong things that Roxana Fiaz has been doing and the lies she has been perpetrating and the criminality that she has been backing. So this is This is 24 minutes to 10 o'clock in the evening. That is to say, it's 21:36 hours GMT on Sunday, the 14th of March 2021. We shall end this particular discussion here. And as I said, I'll focus on the wrongs and lies that Roxana Fiaz has been perpetrating